Hey, what's going on, guys? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at a pretty interesting little Android controller. And actually, this also works for iOS, but in this video we're just going to be testing it with Android. At some point, this was up on either Indiegogo or Kickstarter, but this recently popped up on my Amazon feed, and I figured I'd go ahead and pick it up. This is known as the Shaks S5b. And inside of the box, we're going to get a controller with a case. We also get our USB Type-C charging cable, user manual, and an alternate D-pad. So yeah, this does look pretty interesting. It's a telescopic Bluetooth controller for Android or iOS, and at first glance, you wouldn't notice that it's a telescopic controller till you pull it apart. And I'm going to tell you right now, the pictures that I've seen don't look great with your phone inserted in the middle, but I can actually overlook that if it's a good controller for Android. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. I would have loved for these controllers to be a little closer to the phone itself, but it works, and it does hold these larger phones. This is the Red Magic 6R, and they have an application that allows you to map this controller to games that don't use controllers in the first place, which is a big plus. As for the layout, it's a basic layout here. We have dual analog sticks, D-pad, A, B, X, Y. We also have Start, Select, a back button for Android, Home, Function, and Power. Taking a look at the top, we have 2 shoulder buttons and 2 trigger buttons. These trigger buttons do look a little odd. They do have a lot of throw to them, but that's because they're analog triggers, which means in certain games that support it, like most racing games, if you press it just a little bit, you're going to give it a little bit of gas or a little bit of brake depending on which button you press. And a lot of these Bluetooth Android controllers don't support this. Basically, they're on or off, but we have a full 100% range with both of these triggers here. Over on the right-hand side, we do have a selector switch from Android, Windows, iOS, and the very last one is the mapper function, which will work with the Shaks app, and we're going to take a look at that in a second. What this does is allow the controller to work with games that don't natively support controllers, like Genshin Impact. Down here, we have our Bluetooth pairing button, and this has 5 functional LEDs. The very first one is going to be our battery indicator, and the last 4 change depending on which mode we're in, be it Android, Windows, iOS, or even the mapper setting. And like we saw with the unboxing, we have 2 different D-pad covers here. Getting this paired up to your Android device is pretty easy. We're going to go with Android mode, which will work with games that natively support Android. So we'll power it up, press the pairing button on the bottom here. 2 blue LEDs will start rapidly flashing, and we can move over to the phone now. Just make sure you're in your Bluetooth settings. It should show right up. Give it a second here to scan for these devices. There it is. We'll just go ahead and pair it. And I'm on Android 11, so this might look a little different from older versions of Android. But there we have it. We're now in Android mode, and this will work with emulators and games that support controllers right out of the box. We don't have to do any setup. It's basically working in X input mode like an Xbox controller would connected to your phone. Now, one thing that they offer for free from Google Play is the Shaks app, and this comes in really handy. You can update the firmware, which I would highly recommend doing as soon as you start this up. You will need to have the controller plugged into power to update the firmware. But we also have this gamepad tester, and I can show you here that we have those analog triggers. So everything else is just going to be on or off. But when we move up here to the triggers, you can see that we have analog input, 0 to 100%. Both of these here. And this comes in really handy for racing games. And taking a look at the analog stick input, it's actually pretty good. We have slight movement. You can see that it's not just on or off. This is a true analog stick, and some of the cheaper controllers that you'll find on Amazon are basically on or off. There's not much throw there, and a lot of them have a huge dead zone, but this is doing way better than I thought it would. So the first thing I wanted to do was test a couple games that natively support controllers in Android. There was no setup whatsoever I needed to do with this. All I did was pair it up in Android mode, and it's working with Minecraft. And if you're not sure which games natively support controllers, inside of the Shaks app, they do have a link to their website, and they have a full list of games. Next up, we have the recently ported version of Bikini Bottom for Android, and this does support controllers, as you can see. So with games like Asphalt 9, Real Racing 3, GTA San Andreas, Bully, there are a ton of games that do natively support controllers, and this will work right out of the box with no setup whatsoever. Last thing I wanted to test here in Android mode was the D-pad. So I've gotten to a little bit of emulation here. This is Marvel vs. Capcom 2 running in the Redream emulator, and I wanted to test out this D-pad. I seem to be missing a few here and there. I could get used to it, but as you can hear, it's got a little bit of a clicky sound to it. And it's very oddly shaped. I've actually never messed around with a controller with a D-pad shaped like this. So I think my best solution would be use the other D-pad adapter. I've actually become a big fan of these dished adapters. And with something like this, it does make it a lot easier to use. So we've got regular old Android mode covered. As long as the game supports a controller, it'll work with it. But if you want to use this with games that don't natively support controllers, you can pair it up in a much different way. Just move the selector on the side of the controller to the gear icon and repair it. It'll be in mapper mode. And now, from the Game Shaks app, it'll detect it. And from here, we can use their pre-made profiles, or we can map it ourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and add a game. And it'll be Genshin Impact. I can't wait till it really adds controller support for Android. But you can start it just like it sits with their pre-made profile, or we can go into edit mode. And from here, this is going to allow us to totally customize the inputs. So what this is doing is taking the input from the controller and turning it into a touch input on screen. And it's very basic. I mean, it's super simple to do. You can drag these around to wherever you need them, hit save, and you're ready to go. But I find that the pre-made profiles actually work really well. And yeah, I mean, we have slight movement here. You can go full speed with it. Same thing with the camera. Analog sticks work great. There's no analog triggers in this game. I mean, there's really nothing you could use them for. But the way they've set this up is actually really nice, and it's working really well with these touch inputs. Now, the one thing I will say about their pre-made profile, when you're trying to use a bow character, it's a bit awkward because I'm using that right analog stick to aim and I'm holding B. So I might add the fire button to the left shoulder, but it's totally customizable, so you can kind of pick and choose how you want to use this. There's a few more settings that I wanted to show you inside of the Shaks app. This will work in Android mode or mapper mode. From here, we can change this function button up. And right off the bat, it's set to mouse mode. So if I press the function button on the controller, it'll turn this into a mouse. And the left analog stick will control the cursor. We could also set the function button up to turn on turbo in case you need that for some game. And it does come in handy for older emulators. If you do end up getting one of these controllers, I highly recommend updating the firmware as soon as you get it. But from here, we can actually set it up to sleep after 60 minutes from 5 to 60, and we can change the LED brightness. So we'll turn it right back up. We can reset the controller from here and calibrate the analog sticks. So as soon as you get this, like I mentioned, update the firmware and then go into here and calibrate those analog sticks. You're going to get a much better experience out of it. So yeah, I actually like the controller. I mean, the functionality of it works great, but I hate the design. I mean, we just have so much overhang on each side here. And I know it was kind of hard to pack everything that they wanted into this controller, make it smaller or up closer to the phone itself. But yeah, I mean, as you can see, there is a lot of overhang. But other than that, it's not a bad Bluetooth controller. Now, if you're not into Bluetooth, I would highly recommend the Razer Kishi. You can find those on sale all the time. It uses a USB Type-C connection, so you don't have to worry about any kind of latency over Bluetooth or 2.4 gigahertz. But in the end, I do think this is a solid Bluetooth controller if you're looking for a telescopic controller for your Android device. We have a lot of different functionality built in, from that mapper setup to just running in native Android mode, so it'll work with cloud streaming or games that natively support controllers straight from Google Play. I just kind of wish that the design was a little more streamlined or a little closer to the center itself. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Really appreciate you watching. If you're interested in learning more about this or picking one up, I will leave a few links in the description. The price on this on Amazon is usually around $60, but I was able to pick this up for $53 shipped to the door. Definitely keep an eye out for listings with a coupon attached, because usually you can get like $5, $10, or even $15 off. It just really depends on when you're going to pick one of these up. And if you're not into Bluetooth controllers, like I mentioned, I would recommend the Razer Kishi. I'll also leave a link down below. Those go for $99, but they're always on sale for around $60. So keep an eye out for that also. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And like always, thanks for watching.